Give it to me. All right, you all, welcome back to the Unheard Outsider. I'm your host, Q, coming from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Center here at South Puget Sound Community College. And I have two amazing guests with us today. We're going to talk all things policies and politics, which is something difficult to have, certain difficult conversations to be had, given where you stand on the line of the issue. And so I'm going to let each person in the room, which now are going to be my fam, a part of the show, to introduce themselves and what they do. So let's start off with Adam. Tell the people who you are and what you do.
Yeah, hi everybody, and Q, thanks for having me on. I'm a professor here at SPSCC. I'm the program lead in the paralegal department, the paralegal program, and I teach a variety of law-related courses. I teach intro to law, business law, classes in the paralegal program, and then prior to entering in education, I was practiced as an attorney.
Great, awesome. And we have a wonderful, wonderful guest. Also another guest in the room. Rayne, tell the people who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Rayne Pearson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Administrative Law Director for the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. And so I'm also an administrative law judge, and I oversee the team of judges, and I'm part of the executive leadership team at the commission. And I do have to say that all the views that I express today are my own and don't represent the agency I work for.
I love that. We'll plug that in there real quick. So my first question, I'm just gonna dive right on in. What has been your experience? I want to start with the Rittenhouse case. I would love to know each of your one, how did you feel? What are your thoughts on the case? And is there any hope moving forward after that case at all, being retrialed or not? So I would love to hear from either one of you. Adam, you want to jump in first and we can go to Rayne?
Sure. And QE, we kind of talked a little bit about this just between ourselves the other day and yesterday. And I think kind of the first answer is really, or the first piece of it is really to the last thing you said. There's no retrying that case. The prosecution doesn't get what we would call another bite at the apple, right? So there may be incredibly rare circumstances where a prosecutor can appeal something. It's very rare, it's very limited, and it does not exist in this case. Of course, if the defendant, if Rittenhouse was found guilty, he would have various forms of appeal rights. But prosecutors, that's it. You get your shot and it's over. And double jeopardy is going to apply and all of those things that constitutional protections are going to be in place. My reaction, and it's interesting because it's literally just as we started this conversation, we saw the Ahmaud Arbery verdict just came in, right? So, I mean, just literally just came in. So that's still fresh.
I haven't even seen it yet because I've been in meetings. So
you want me to tell you now, or you want me to wait?
Sure, yo, okay. This is all live, yo.
all three guilty.
Mm.
All three guilty. And there were 27 counts. The individual who was the shooter was found guilty on all counts. The other two who were involved were found guilty on everything except, I think, with the initial charge on the shooting. And they were found guilty on felony murder, various counts of felony murder. There was one other lesser charge, and I think that maybe the father who was on the back of the truck was charged with, that was found not guilty of that, but they've all been found guilty of murder. Mm-hmm. So, that's so fresh, just as the Rittenhouse case is fresh. I personally think in the Rittenhouse case, the verdict from a legal perspective to me is not surprising. And it's not surprising to me because the minute that I heard the prosecution witness who was actually shot by Rittenhouse on that night say, I pointed my gun at him first, that was it. The case was going to be over. And then the prosecution's witnesses didn't get better after that. And they didn't try to rehabilitate the witness on the I mean, they let that out there, and when in self-defense cases, and this was how it played out in Wisconsin, the standard is that if the defendant alleges self-defense and can provide any evidence to indicate that there was self-defense, the burden shifts to the prosecution, meaning the prosecution actually has to prove the negative beyond a reasonable doubt that, right, it was not an action in self-defense.
Mhm.
And so I don't think it was really well prosecuted, frankly, but I also just think that I think they had an uphill battle based on at least the evidence that was shown that we were able to see watching the trial. Just because a verdict is proper, perhaps under the eyes of the law, though, it doesn't mean it's right. So that's the bigger issue at play, right? But I can logically see that the jury could do their job appropriately and reach the conclusion that they reached in that case. That's kind of what was my takeaway of it when I saw it.
Okay. Rayne, thoughts?
So I'll just tell you, full disclosure right now, I did not pay close attention to that trial. I guard myself from the news for mental health reasons.
Absolutely.
A lot. But I mean, my thoughts are somewhat similar. I wasn't at all surprised by the verdict. I think that having studied the law through the lens that I've studied it, and at my core, being an abolitionist and not thinking that this system is salvageable in any way whatsoever, I guess, I'm more troubled by, like Adam was saying, why are the laws written the way that they're written? Why are these standards that we apply in court, these standards of reasonableness, these standards of fear, these standards related to perception, the focus on intent over impact, these are all tools of white supremacy culture. So to me, it's like, the system's just very, very broken. And this was a perfect demonstration of that.
Okay. I'll jump around quite often because my brain is like tennis. I've been kind of researching or just kind of delving a little bit into like what the police reform situation is happening within Washington State. And I know I had read that there have been some ambiguity around what police officers can and can't do, I guess, from a physical approach, which was, I think, House Bill 1310 and 1054, one of the two, I think. Do you know about that in regards to, one of the things that I read an article on was that it was people's understanding that a police officer, their limit to being like physically attacking or approaching someone. But I also read that it just feels very weird on how they were explaining it to me based off of people who are like me, like mental health reasons. Like, where is the boundary line with that piece of it? Like, I guess I don't know a lot about it. I knew that there were some things here in the state of Washington that have been updated as far as what police can and can't do, but I don't know if you all know anything about that, and if you can let us know if you do know.
So I'm not familiar with the House bill or the change, but generally, an officer, when you're looking at an officer involved shooting, right? Or it doesn't even have to be a shooting, right? But an officer use of force, the jury, or in the case, is going to be instructed to be asked to sit in the mind of the officer, that officer, at what was going on, right? And which, by the way, is not the test used in every. Sometimes you are put in the mind of a subjective person in the circumstance. So that fact is important. That standard, that test is incredibly important, because now all of a sudden what the officer has said is very important, right? What the officer perceived. That's why it's very, very hard to get a conviction on an officer in a use of force case, because I perceive myself or somebody else to be in danger, somebody, they don't even have to, you'll hear a shooting will happen and then the suspect will not have been found to have a firearm on it, right? I told them not to reach, they reached, I pulled out my weapon and fired because I believe that they were reaching for a gun when I said, don't reach for a gun. I mean, there are countless shootings that have happened that way. There's studies on stuff like that. And years ago, a video circulated that has been used by defense attorneys where it talks about how fast a person, particularly a trained person to use a firearm, can perceive something, draw their gun and fire it. And it's something like 2 or 3 seconds that action happens in, right? And so in 2 or 3 seconds, from the second that I, the officer, perceived something, right, to be a threat, I then acted. And when you have that standard, that's why you're seeing it being very, very hard. So for me, I view it, one of the biggest issues there to try to address that is a training issue. But I do agree with what Rayne said. I think was a broader statement than just the Rittenhouse case. It is laws need to be revisited across the board. It's not just we're going to fix the self-defense law, problem solved.
Right.
It's looking really at where are these points that are creating the issues that we're seeing in the system. And I'm sort of on the fence guy of, can we work with what we have, or do we need to start over? I don't necessarily know where I don't even know where I fall on that, but I do know or can see the areas where work needs to be done, at least.
Yeah, they have passed something, or at least changed something about like chokeholds and something like that in Washington State. So they updated the language, right? But the thing that was a little bit more ambiguous is like how they respond to certain calls, in particular. And it was just a little, the way the way that it sounded was a little like, well, we can still show up, but it depends on if we go to that call. Like, it almost felt like cherry picking to me. And I don't know, but I want to definitely let Rayne kind of jump in here. I don't know if you know about the language that's changed here in the state of Washington or not.
I don't. I'm not familiar with it, but I can pretty much guarantee you it's cherry picking language. I would feel very confident in making that guess.
Yeah, no, it was weird because I was like, well, my concern is it felt like they still were allowing police to show up regardless, right? Or it felt like, okay, well, we can listen to see what call it is and maybe decide if we want to show up. But if it almost is, it was giving like the police force agency to just show up if they want to, even if it is something that's more of a mental health situation that may not need them of any kind. That was a little concerning for me, given what we've seen before with police showing up and getting into shit that they shouldn't be in my opinion, when it comes to folks with mental health. My next question would be for you all, and this is probably a hard one, but I would love to hear your thoughts, is qualified immunity for police officers. Do you think that the state of Washington will ever get to the point of banning that?
Did you say qualified immunity? You kicked out of my...
Yes. Do you think, because I know that there's two, I know, is it New Mexico? Or is Mexico or New Mexico has banned that? So I'm wondering, do you think we'll get to a place where we'll jump on the bandwagon with that?
Well, so the US Supreme Court didn't help anything recently because they just, in a case not all that long ago, in the last couple of weeks or a month or so now, within this quarter, have upheld qualified immunity. So it's something I would like to see at the state level. As we've been chatting, I was sort of looking to see if I could pull up the police reform bills that you were talking about here. And I couldn't get too much of a sense of them, but some of them were talking about requiring more reasonable care for an officer to use force, some de-escalation training. I mean, I think I think of states out there. I think that Washington is not as bad as certain other states that are out there on these issues, right? But not as bad doesn't necessarily mean good, right? When you're dealing with something. But for whatever reason, I'm not hopeful when I see, and it was a pretty, I don't know if it was unanimous, but it wasn't like a 5-4 decision on a qualified immunity case in the Supreme Court. Judges seem to just not want to let that go. And that's one of the things that I sort of struggle with a little bit as to the question, because I'm just not seeing the courts get on board with it. And so hopefully the legislature in the state level will try to do something, because that is a potential game changer. If all of a sudden you're personally liable, right, then that could really have some level of impact.
Rayne, what are your thoughts on that?
Having never practiced in this area, I can speak in, broader terms, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably fairly unlikely that we'll see that done away with, just because of, unless we have radical reform in this country on so many levels.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be done away with. I agree with that. If it's anything, it's going to be reduced, or they're going to create a higher standard, or whatever the case may be. It's not going to go away. Right? Yeah. Remember, lawyers write the laws, and lawyers like to put things in that protect the law and protect the legal field. And yes, law enforcement is a component, right? So that tension is there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the reason I asked is because I have been followed in Olympia, believe it or not, on numerous occasions, like thinking that they're gonna find. I'm like, bitch, I don't got a record. You know what I mean? Like, are you? You know what I mean? Like, do you really want this? They move on. I mean, I've been pulled over in a state vehicle, by the way, that I've been like, is this your vehicle? And I was twice. So I was pulled over in Olympia, then I was pulled over in Lacey, and I had a state vehicle, because the reason I have a state vehicle is because I'm a state employee. I can't get a state fucking vehicle if I don't show identification to the people to get it was like, is this your vehicle? It's not my fucking vehicle. Like, you really do you understand? Like, and so I'm like, I had to literally show my driver's license, of course, and I had to show my work ID. Like, bitch, yes, I work, and I don't turn the car in until tomorrow. Like, like, it was just weird. And that's why I was just asking, because I feel like there's just police officers out there that's just really looking to, like, in my opinion, it feels like meet a quota at this point. And so I really wanted to just get your thoughts on that. On that, I struggle, and I know me and Adam talked about this yesterday, is that, my mom's side of the family, a lot of my cousins are products of getting horrible sentences for small shit like marijuana, and so much other shit. And so it was just put me in a traumatic experience, because I mean, I literally was, it was just traumatic, right? And it's not the first time I've been pulled over, but which is why I don't go out at night, and people don't understand that. People are like, well, you should come out. No. If I'm going out, I'm taking an Uber or a Lyft. And I don't think people think about the fact that, like, of people of color, we have to, like, just strategically figure out, like, how to, like, live our lives safely, but also the cost, like, financial cost in having to go around that is just crazy. So, like, I usually would, like, my friends in grad school were like, hey, let's go out, drink and stuff. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna be out for an hour and I'm going back home. Lo and behold, I'm always nervous driving at night, which is why I don't usually drive at night. I don't like doing it at night at all. If anything, I'm taking an Uber, Lyft, Amtrak, flying. I'm just not like I don't even have a car anymore. And the true reason one is financial. Number one is a lot, especially the cost of living out here. But two, it's also because I have a fear of getting pulled over and getting shot. Like I'm just not interested. I prefer to deal with Uber and Lyft, having someone drive and I can get dropped off. But it's trauma for me, so I just want to put that out there in the space.
Well, can I add something on the quota piece of that?
Sure.
Actually, I think it was just in the last week, there was an article. The quota thing is real. I don't know that, I can't say that it is real for Washington or Olympia or whatever, but there are jurisdictions where revenue is tied to the stops and the tickets, and right. And there's been some sort of investigative journalist pieces written about that recently. But I don't know that I would say that that's an important factor. But to me, there's this other underlying issue, which is deeper than that quota or not quota, it's statistically a reality that a person of color is going to get stopped by a police officer, is going to get in a violent confrontation with a police officer, is going to get injured or killed by a police officer. And maybe quotas are a part of that, but I think that there's some distinction there. I don't necessarily know that it's tied just to the fact that there's quota, and that's problematic, right? It's problematic either way, if it is or if it isn't, but it is, to me, it's everybody can have their own opinion of what they think, and that's absolutely right. But to me, the hard thing to hear is when a friend of mine tells me I'm afraid to drive, and the community that friend of mine is in says that, right? This isn't just one person says that I'm afraid to go out at night, right? So that to me, it gets to the root of the issue, right? A community is saying we have this concern. Other people can agree or disagree with that, but we can listen to that concern. And I don't know that, the quota piece is an interesting piece to it, but there's something other than that that's tying to what you're feeling, at least.
Thank you. Rayne, I didn't know if you want to chime in too.
Sure. I mean, I'm thinking about what Adam was saying just about higher incidences. And I'm thinking about not only cops and their perceptions, but, their standards for involving themselves with people, that they have to have a reasonable, articulable suspicion before they stop someone. What's reasonable? Like, whose perspective are we from whose perspective are we defining what's reasonable? Because I guarantee you it's white, it's racist, it's male, but we're supposed to adopt these things as just universal and neutral and objective. And that's my biggest issue with the law in general, are all these lies about what's reasonable and what's objective. It's like, this is all garbage. It's all just intended to uphold a very intentionally crafted system.
And the reasonable suspicion piece, is not stated in the Constitution, right? You need to have a warrant issued upon probable cause, but of course, reasonable suspicion comes from the famous Terry v. Ohio case, where the police officer just thought what the person was doing looked sketchy, basically, right? And stopped. And then, in fact, it's not just reasonable suspicion to talk, it's actually reasonable suspicion to conduct a limited search of the individual. Well, what happens is you conduct a limited search, or you start, right? Oh, now I found something. Oh, now I got probable cause. Now I can arrest you. Now you're in my car, or now you're in the station. Now I can talk to you some more. The person doesn't know their rights, or they don't get a lawyer, or whatever the case may be. They might admit to something, or right. Once you're in that car and you become part of the system, right? And then we've talked about this, Q, a couple of times, I think, where the hardest piece of it, of the system, and I was a former prosecutor, right? So I've been on I had this lens firsthand, is seeing people be brought in on things that are relatively minor offenses, possession offenses, low-level misdemeanor offenses, things that ordinarily you would say, why, give the person a ticket and move on, or legalize it and move on, right? But let's pick why is somebody's life being, and what happens is they get in the system, it starts at that arrest from this reasonable suspicion, right? They get in all the way, they get in the system. Oh, just plead guilty. You're not going to do any time, right? It's gone away. Well, just pleading guilty doesn't make it go away, Now you've got to pay your fines and your fees. You've got to check in with your probation officer, whoever it is. You've got to do certain things. Well, you can't miss work one day, which means you don't get to go do the thing that you're supposed to do for court. Well, now, we got to get you a warrant issued and we got to get this person in here. And, a lot of the lens is we gave you the chance when we gave you the plea. Now we gave you the plea, you didn't do the thing you were going to do. Now we had to get this warrant. Now we brought you in. And you could just see this revolving door of the same faces and people over and over and over again. And, it starts with that, hey, what are you doing over there? Stop oftentimes. Or, I'm stopping you for a busted taillight, or I'm stopping you for this, or and those are currently lawful reasons to stop somebody, right? Yes. So that it's this weird balance that plays out in that regards, because they are lawfully stopping you. They, because reasonable suspicion, as Rayne said, who decides it? It's going to be decided by the cop at the time, confirmed by the court in the probable cause hearing. If there's, and oftentimes a probable cause hearing gets waived because the lawyers waive it and they move on just straight. So there's a lot of stuff, you can't just pinpoint and say we fixed this, it's that, we fixed this, it's that. You have to look at how does the chain work to get this person who travels through, and what is happening at each point in time.
Yeah. What is one or two things that you're concerned about politically, just universal, that you might be concerned about moving forward with the country right now? Either of you, one or two things that is concerning for you is where we're moving. Because I know one of them for me is pissing me off, but I'm interested to hear.
Well, now I kind of want to hear.
Yeah.
Mine is just the whole voting suppression shit. Like that's scaring the shit out of me right now. Like it's scaring me. I'm just concerned because I have a lot of family that live in the fucking South, and so I'm worried. And I have a lot of family that lives down in Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, like I do. But I'm interested just to hear, like, from just politics right now, what are you really concerned about? We know Trump is looking to, I think they say he was going to run again. God, please save us, because I don't think I can go through, and I don't think I'll be able to survive. I'll be like, all right, I'm out of the country at that point. Like, I'm serious. Like, I'm a little concerned. So you all being so involved in, politics, even just being within the law, what are some concerns moving forward right now?
So I when we touched on the voting piece too, when we talked kind of offline, so the voting piece is a big issue. And I've actually been privileged to, for the last 2 years, have been asked to go over to St. Martin's University and speak to the basketball team about voting issues. The NCAA requires now voter education. And I've been asked by Coach Landon to talk with the team in the last 2 years. And I've said this both years. If people are trying to take action to prevent others from voting, the red flags should be going off everywhere. Like break open glass, emergency red flags. That is a mission critical problem that has to be solved. But what people don't understand is a lot of talk is, voter ID laws and gerrymandering and all of these things. And those are important issues and they have to be addressed. But what people don't realize is there is no constitutional right to vote in this country. There are reasons that if the vote is given, it can't be denied. It can't be denied based on race. It can't be denied based on gender. It can't be denied because of a poll tax. It can't be denied if you're 18 or over, right? Those are constitutional. And the states, really up until the early 1900s, late 1800s, they picked the electors themselves. It did not have a popular vote. And there is nothing that stops the states from doing that. In the 2024 election, Georgia is actively trying to set it up so that if the popular vote does not work the way they want, they can send their own electors to go. And that is lawful. That should be chilling to people, right? That idea, that concept. So I agree with you. The voting issue, all the time that's getting, infrastructure, that's hugely important, right? The other package, the Build Back Better package that they're trying to do, or whatever they're calling it, those are important things, the social safety net issues and all of that. But if we're seeing an active campaign to stop people from voting, that's emergency level. That has to be remedied. The Electoral College Act, I can't remember when it was passed, and Rayne, you may know better than I do. It was 1817 or something like that. We haven't revisited the Electoral College Act, right, since the early 1800s. How is that not being discussed and on the table after what happened? And again, putting political beliefs aside, but after what happened on January 6th, right? The United States can't demand to be a leader in the world and have people question the integrity of its elections, period. And so I see that as a big problem. The other problem to me is less a legislative issue or a legal issue or anything like that, and just it's such a toxic culture of my side versus your side. I'm right, I'm not going to give in. No, I'm right. I mean, like, you see the pettiness that they're doing. And I know every generation always sort of was like, oh, you think it's bad now, you wouldn't have imagined when Nixon was president, or, well, I don't know, I wasn't there when Nixon was president. It's pretty bad now, right? There's things that are happening now that we need to address, and we need to address it so everyone's confidence is restored. That everyone has confidence in the system, right? You've got to be able to believe that your side might lose and live with that result. You've got to be able to believe that we can sit in a room and have a conversation and not name call and not, right? So that, to me, the culture that is created in DC has to change.
Okay. Rayne.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that voter suppression is a huge issue, and I'm just thinking about how I don't know what the right word is, or what the word that I'm looking for is, but just the fact that this country is so unwilling to even acknowledge its history, let alone revisit its history. And I think that what Adam was talking about is just so demonstrative of that shortcoming, especially that white Americans have, just that unwillingness to even accept the fact that, like, the people who wrote the Constitution, something like 70 to 90% of them enslaved people, and they wrote the Constitution with the sole purpose of protecting that arrangement. And everything about our government developed from that premise. And so it's like, everything that's going on with voter suppression, it's just the same things that have been going on for 150 years, new tactics, but the end goal has always been the same, which is to maintain the racial caste system.
I learned something today. Two, it's scary to know that it's lawful to be able to do such things, as you explained, Adam. And I'm interested to hear from you all, like, things that you would like to share. Like, I would love to hear, like, Rayne, like, what you know of that the state's working on from a DEI lens. I would love to hear from you so that our listeners know what's going on, because when you are informed and knowledge-based, you can do a lot of things. So please tell us what's going on.
Yeah, I got a lot to say about that. So the good news is that the governor passed a law and created the State Office of Equity, which their entire goal is to make Washington an anti-racist state. And what that's done is empowered state agencies to move forward with EDI initiatives. We call it EDI at my agency. We put equity first.
Yeah.
And that came from a training that we did through Courageous Conversation. I don't know if you're familiar with that organization, Glenn Singleton. He's very well known in the arena of EDI, which interestingly enough, really started in education before it spread kind of to the wider corporate and government sectors. And the example that they gave us in the class, they said, you have to put equity before diversity. It's like putting diversity first is like inviting people over to your house for a party, but you have a dirty house, no snacks, and bad music. Putting equity first means you're inviting people to a party that they're going to actually enjoy and be able to participate, feel included, feel like they belong. So we restructured our committee based on that. And I think the most interesting thing about EDI work is that unfortunately, you can approach it in kind of a box checking way if you want to and not really implement real change. That's not what we're doing. We're working on a complete cultural transformation within our organization, and we're meeting resistance. We're being met with some resistance. And I think that a lot of people who are initially like, oh yeah, this is great, they can pay lip service to it, but then we ask them to do the work. We ask them to engage in, uncomfortable or difficult conversations that obviously become more comfortable and less difficult the more you have them. And we see a lot of white fragility, a lot of, I don't feel safe having these conversations, or I'm scared I'm going to say the wrong thing, a lot of weaponizing of privilege and discomfort. And so I'm the person who gets to call that out when it happens. And I do so gladly. And I recommend that people attend trainings, and I assign books for them to read. And, we're actually going to be bringing Courageous Conversation into our organization for an agency-wide 2-day training. And Courageous Conversation focuses specifically on having conversations about racial equity and never taking the focus off of that, keeping that at the center of the conversation, giving people tools and protocols for having these conversations. And they're a wonderful organization. So I'm really excited about that. But it's definitely, like I said, Angela Davis has a quote about how diversity is a corporate concept. It's not synonymous with justice, right? So it is easy to just pay lip service. But one thing that we've done that I think was super important was we created a BIPOC council for our employees of color. And they're kind of like a business resource group. So they get together, and basically our senior leadership team, we don't make any decisions without their approval. So we've kind of ceded the power and the decision-making authority to them when it comes to, reviewing position descriptions, to root out words like professional and, words that are very coded with white supremacy, and looking at changing our policies and working on some trauma-informed leadership. And, we're really trying to kind of capture the whole universe and move the management team forward. But about the council, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second.
Okay, you do your thing.
I think the most important thing is to listen to the voices of the people who are impacted and marginalized. We don't ask them to do the emotional labor. We say, here's our plan. Here's what we're going to do. Do you like this plan? Yes. Okay. We're going to go develop the content, the policies, bring them back to you, sign off on it again. Okay, great. Move forward. So, we're doing the work, but to me, it made no sense to have a council of employees of color and have them give us recommendations and then still have the oversight of this white or nearly all white management team at the end of the day. That's lip service. That's not real change, right? So ceding the power and, it's like open the door, get out of the way, basically. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking, and it's working great. And we also have, so here's a couple of interesting things that we're doing.
Awesome.
I love this. So we have made it so that every single candidate who interviews with our agency, we have an interview panel that has to have both a member of the BIPOC Council and a member of the EDI committee. And we've all been through anti-bias training. And then we've also added new interview questions that every candidate has to answer. First, about what they've done to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion over the course of their career. And then we ask them where they are in their anti-racist journey. What books have they read? What trainings have they taken? And we were getting some resistance to these questions. Oh, well, those people will be scared. It's like, The only wrong answer is going to be, I don't believe racism exists and I'm not on that journey. It's okay to say I'm at the beginning of the journey, but I recognize how important this is. We've even had candidates say things like, I'm embarrassed to say I didn't really start paying attention until 2020, but I'm paying attention now, So just needing to see that level of commitment, because we're not going to bring anyone in the door who's not committed to this, taking this journey with us. And I also hate the word journey. Like, I've been upset about that before. And like, you're weaponizing your journey because you want to go at a slower pace and everyone needs to go at their own pace. Well, people are dying. Yeah.
Don't even get me started about that. That's a whole nother show.
I would just add one other answer that could be given that is frustrating, because I've been on some hiring committees and I've heard that answer, which is the infamous "I don't see color" answer.
Oh God.
And I
red
just,
flag.
That to me is just, you want to put your own head through a wall when somebody says that, and it's sort of like, at a minimum, you just kind of want to be like, are you not following anything that's going on in the world at all, right? Or are you, and so that is another answer that you'll hear that is a red, like you said, Rayne, is a
huge red flag. Yes. And then when people say, I don't care if you're blue or purple, people don't come in those colors.
Right, unless there's a health issue
or it's the Smurfs. I mean, come on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Rayne, you cracked me up. But I just want you to know, if you can make me laugh, like Adam makes me laugh too. So that's a good thing. One thing I like that I'm hearing is that it doesn't sound like that it's performative. And I know when we think about DEI work, it can seem like it's a very performative, like on the outside of the things we can say, oh yeah, we're doing this work, but it can seem very performative. Sounds like you're making we're doing this because we want to hear, and they're going to tell us what is going to work. And that's just really what it is. And I appreciate that. I know you wanted to chime in. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's funny to me how white people we don't realize that people of color can tell when we're being performative. Like, I've heard so many white people say things, they give the same speech every time whenever they're asked a question. I'm like, here it comes again. And it's not convincing. It's like, if you're actually doing the work, or you've done the work, or you've lived the experience, when someone's being fake. And it's like, you can't fake your way through this. And I've said that to the management team over and over again. You cannot fake your way through this. You will have to change who you are as a person. And to give you some context, in undergrad, I had a double major in women's studies and journalism and African American history. They called it Africana studies at NYU, which is where I went. So most of my classes were interdisciplinary race and gender studies. I went through my whole racial consciousness awakening when I was like 19 or 20, so like 25 years ago. And then I went to law school. I went to a social justice oriented law school, took a lot of classes that applied, they didn't call it critical race theory, but they were applying that lens to it and looking at the systemic realities of our laws and institutions. And, I've kept myself up to date on all this stuff. So I feel like I've just been waiting in the wings, and now's my time to come out and shine. And what you were saying about like the performative aspect of it, I feel like as the person who's pushing the envelope the hardest, I would say with my white peers, I kind of wait for the day where I hit a wall. Like, I have that fear in the back of my mind. Like, at some point, each one of them is going to be like, this is too much. I can't do this anymore. You're asking too much of me. This is too hard. So I always have that kind of in the back of my mind as we're, going through these exercises and making these changes. It's like, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, where's your limit? Where's your limit? And what am I going to do? And am I going to then become the villain? Or, well, she's extreme. She's taking it too far. So that's always something that's kind of like, is this real? Okay, you're going to let us do this? Okay, just keep moving forward,
I think it's fantastic. And I want to just really, as we would say, double down on what Rayne said in regards to people of color can feel. I know when you are talking some bullshit to me. Like, I don't speak white people talk. Like, I didn't grow up with that. So all I can say is, for me, I know when you bullshitting me. I also know when a person of color who ain't really for us is talking some bullshit. So I want to be clear about that. If you haven't listened to the episode, when all skin folk ain't kinfolk. I want to be clear about that. But I do think that I just want to say I have had people even here at this institution, you know, try to talk some shit to me, and I'm like, okay, child, what, all right, whatever, child. We can feel it in our soul. I'm just letting you, like, we can feel it. Like, okay. Like, you leave the room and we already been like, fuck that bitch. Okay. You know, and I'm just being honest. I mean, I've been in spaces where POCs are like, we shaking our head like, okay, I try to fuck that bitch. You know, like, we gonna move on. For real, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, you are right. Like, period. So yeah. I want to say that. Adam, did you want to jump in?
Well, no, I mean, I agree with that, that lens. And it's sort of, you know, the idea that I can tell when somebody is right, to assume that others can't, right? You know, to not even to assume that others can't, but to not even register. It's not even right. It's not even it wouldn't even register, you know, and that's the issue. And you know, what I had, I had been following a little bit about what the governor recently did and some of the changes, but I hadn't, you know, kind of heard at the agency level what they're doing. So it's really good to hear. You know, I'm sure every agency is probably approaching it differently, which is part of the problem, by the way. But every agency is. But I think that, you know, Rayne said something that was important, sort of like, you can start your process now. And Q, I've said this to you, just even a big start of it is closing your mouth and listening to what somebody else has to say. Again, you don't have to agree with everything that somebody says, but if you stop speaking and listen and let the person just say what they want to say, you're already doing something for them, because they're getting off to say from their lens, this is me and this is what I feel. And at a minimum, I think you can say back to just say, I can appreciate how you might feel that way. And Q, again, this is something we've talked about. I have no idea what your experience is. You know, believe it or not, we look a little different, right? So your experience is different than mine, right? And I don't know, and I don't know your experience by looking at you. You don't know my experience by looking at me, but I feel that we can have an honest conversation where I can just listen to you, and at times you listen to me. And I think even if just that is the start of it, and it was good to hear that, Rayne, it sounds like that's a big piece of it. Just listening, you know, especially with putting the groups together to really weigh in and have some authority, some teeth behind it, right? It's great to have committees, but if committees don't have any teeth, then, you know, it's a group of people in a room having a conversation about something that's not going to get very far. So
I have a question for Rayne. Rayne, I mean, okay, you don't have to answer them.
That I will.
What's the racial ratio of judges in the state of Washington? Do we have any of color?
I don't know about that. I could only speak for my agency, and we're all white, but I would think it's extremely white, not representative of the population would be my guess.
Okay.
The legal profession is not.
Yeah.
You know, Q, somebody had sent me, there was a report done about Washington State, and if I can find it, it actually does address some of these issues. I think it talks a little bit more about the bar, meaning, you know, the profession as a whole, but there are some stats in there, and it's pretty staggering. Okay. And this is not exclusive to the legal profession.
No.
Right. You know, but pretty darn important in the legal profession. Right. So if I can pull that report up, I will send it to you. It's pretty comprehensive.
That's good. A reason I asked, because I mean, to be honest with you, as people, like, when I watch the cases on television and I'm like, another, and I'm sorry, but that's just my lived, like, another white man, like, you know, like, I'm like, you know, like, there, I feel, and this is what, 3 times where I'm like, are they making behind the scene, like, calls on not putting a person of color as a judge, thinking that it's going to be a bias, like that, like, I'm like, here we go again. Like, why? I know that there has to be people of color as judges out there. I know, And I'm like, so every time we have this shit happen and injustice is another white man, like that's fucking trauma just to watch that, because we don't know what's gonna happen. So that's why I was asking that question, because I'm like, I know it's a product of what the system is, right? But I'm like, damn, is it like not no?
Well, I think what you said was really interesting though, just now about, the thought that perhaps a judge who was a person of color wouldn't be able to be objective. It just comes back to that whole associating whiteness with objectivity and thinking that, well, and especially a white man, he'll be the most objective. Like, okay.
Yeah, and I don't want to take away that there's not any out there that will not do what's right, but it's just like it just drives me up the walls, because every time I go, like I was talking to Adam about this yesterday, is that I did jury duty, which I love to do. I love doing my civic duties. And my first experience, it was a Black woman, and I was like, oh my, like, okay, oh, this is fantastic. Like for me, like coming in, I'm like, oh, this is really fantastic. Like my first experience. And so that was my experience. So I'm like, I know there gotta be more judges of color out there than just us watching this on national television of just white men.
I will tell you, this will be shocking. I have never appeared in front of a judge of color.
Oh.
In my career when I practiced law, ever.
Okay.
Now, it's not to say, right, there are out there, but again, right, it is a statistically low number, and it is certainly not consistent with the population at all. Well, and Sonia Sotomayor is the first Latinx member of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
She's only been on for how many years, right? So, Thurgood Marshall, the first African-American justice of the Supreme Court, which it was, I believe he was appointed in the 70s or 80, right? Whenever that, I think the early 80s.
Yeah.
So 82, I think is the number that's coming to my mind. And so that's not a long time ago. Yeah. Right. Not to date myself, but I was alive. Right. So,
I agree.
It's so, yeah, there are out there, but you haven't gotten the numbers that they anywhere near where they should be. And also when you think about when we started the needle on putting people, right, because we were at 0 until all of a sudden, okay, now we got the first, and now right. It's the representation is low. That is a fair observation.
No, that's my last question for you as we close out, though, is that, and I know both of you are on the ground in a lot of ways. What are some things that people in the community can get involved in and either pushing, like organizations? And because I have been here for a little bit over 4 years, and I live in a cocoon, but I also feel like Washington State, or particularly Olympia area, is very like just separated in pockets. So I don't know, like, if there's organizations, things that people can look into or be a part of, or should be a part of, or looking into, as far as like knowing what policies and laws are being passed within Washington. Is there any information that you all can share, or even websites or anything like that you know of?
There are some sites, and I can't remember if it's opensecrets.org, or there's another one that tracks all legislation, and it will track legislation in the state of Washington. It tracks it everywhere. If that's not the right site, I will find it and give it to you.
Absolutely.
I think I actually have it linked on the Paralegal LibGuide, which is publicly available to anywhere. You can access it from the SBSCC library. You don't have to be a student or staff member to access it.
Okay.
So individuals can track legislation. Okay. Individuals can write their state representatives. They can write their federal representatives. They should write their state representatives. They should write those. A lot of the federal representatives hold monthly or quarterly calls that you can call in on and ask a question publicly of the person. do those things.
Hmm.
Vote, even in a local election, it matters,
Yes.
right? You know, and people think, oh, it's a local election. Sometimes that governing is more important than what's going on at the national level. The school board, right? You know, this just came out. I was talking to the St. Martin's team about this. You know, this election in for school board elections that just happened in Washington and other states that were going on, there was out of state money being contributed to people who were running for school board positions.
Oh.
What in the world is out of state dollars doing coming into a local school board election? That's all politics. That's all getting somebody with this belief and that belief. So get involved in your local election. You can intern, volunteer, work for a representative or a candidate that you're interested in their ideas. You can call on their behalf. You can do events on their behalf. There are legal organizations that help the needs of the community. Thurston County Volunteer Legal Services, who's a really great friend of the college and a great organization, which is probably always in need of help and intake people and right to learn about the needs in that regards. Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project is a great organization, you know, that's out there. They're a little bit more north, but still, you know, in the area, in the community. And if people, students, non-students are listening and are looking to find something like that, they can reach out to me and I'm happy to point them in a direction that might be a good fit. But more so to me, okay, than where you go or is to be engaged. Okay. And being engaged is hard. Yeah, because aside from the fact that it's time consuming and everyone's got other stuff going on and all these worries going on and we're still in this pandemic and all this stuff, right? Being engaged is hard because it's draining, because oftentimes you will have significantly more losses than you will have wins. But be engaged, and then you'll find the right fit for where your energy should be.
Great. Rayne, did you have anything you want to plug in?
Sure. So on a more like grassroots level, I highly recommend there's a private Facebook group called Olympia Rallies and Protests, and they stay abreast of everything going on in Olympia. They do mutual aid. There's a lot of really good information and pretty well-known local activists who frequent the group, but they really keep tabs on everything going on.
Nice.
The one thing I can't help with is social media, so I'm not on any. So that's, yeah, I got nothing there for you on that one.
It's all good. No, I appreciate that. This is fantastic. I'm still gonna work on what Adam had suggested. Give a person 5 minutes, and so I'm still working on that. I am. It's rough, because when I know you're on that bullshit, I'm like, oof, but I'm just gonna stand there and shake my head.
Well, so, should I say what that is? Should I tell everybody what the 5 minute
yeah.
So as Q, you're alluding to, we had a conversation yesterday, and I had said one of the things that I'm actively trying to do, and I've told other people, or I'll get calls from somebody, hey, do you have a couple minutes? And my comment, now it's almost become a joke. People know it because I say it so much, is sure, I'll give you 5 minutes. And my point to that is give everybody a couple minutes to hear what they have to say. You can decide what you're going to do with their next 5 minutes. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Right. And you can figure that out in the first 5. Right. Of course, it's just a lesson to give people an initial chance. And then again, you have the power to decide what you're going to do after that. But I just feel like if everybody just said, hey, yeah, I'll give everybody couple minutes here to hear you out, hear what you got to say, and at a minimum, no matter what happens, you're going to learn something. A really good thing may come out of it, or you may say, that person has got no more time with me. The clock is out, right? But either one of those is still an important lesson. So, so that's the piece that I just think is important. Just give everybody a couple minutes of time and go from there.
I appreciate that.
Bless you.
I feel like that was the universe coming back at me. I'm like, damn. All right. Because you know how something hits you, you be like, sounds like that was for me. I don't be giving people time. My supervisor, Parfait, he'd be like, Q, just no, no. Like it takes a lot to build my trust, right? And so when you do some shit and break it, it's almost like I've hit the little trapdoor button. And and so I'm getting better. I am in therapy, y'all. So I'm trying to get back to turning over new leaves and forgiveness and all of those things. So I am working on doing better. But it's so great to have you all here today. This was a great conversation. This was actually very helpful for me. I would love to have you all come back to this space, of course, for different topics, because it always gets juicy and hot as the seasons go on of conversation. And I always leave people with a quote, one of my favorite quotes by Iyanla Vanzant. I feel like she's my spirit animal. But love people enough to tell them the truth and respect them enough to trust that they can handle it. And that's exactly how I kind of move forward in my life. But folks, I'm gonna let y'all go and I'm gonna talk to them after this, just to kind of see how they doing on their everyday life. But thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you all soon.